We are going to be hosting Miss Sona Vaish Venkat today, and it's going to be really amazing because she is someone who comes with a lot of experience across various different companies, in fact, amazing companies, SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, and she has her own startup as well, Awara Ventures. So we will be talking with her today. So before we start off with this, today's session, so in case you have any questions, comments, suggestions, feedback, whatever it may be, just put it down in the chat, and we will reply then and there. So with that, so I would say today's session is really going to be interesting. Is the reason is because she is someone who has worked 20 years. I mean, 20 years in really amazing companies, and that should actually add up to a lot of experience she carries with her. So I'm pretty sure she has a lot to share with all of us. So that's what we are going to talk about. So we are going to talk about leadership, business, marketing, strategy. So all the interesting topics we may want to learn from her. So without any delays, let's quickly jump onto the stream, invite her. So again, if you have any questions, just drop it down in the chat. So with it, let me invite her onto the stream. Hi.
Hi there, Vignesh. How are you?
I am doing great. How are you?
Good, good. It's a cloudy morning here in Seattle, but it's good.
Nice to hear that. So actually, before we start up with the episode today, so can we start with an introduction to who Sona Venkat actually is, so that we can get some context into today's session?
Sure. So thanks for having me on first and foremost. And thanks for that introduction. I don't know if I should feel old or experienced, but I have, first of all, I'm Sona.
Old in
I'm based
experience.
right. I'm Sona. I'm based in Seattle. Have been here for the last 2 years, and Microsoft brought me out here after a career that was almost pretty much entirely on the East Coast, with the exception of a few years. And it's funny. I think that life points you in certain directions. I left business school at Carnegie Mellon exactly 20 years ago. This summer, and it was the time of the dot-coms, and I ended up being in California, and my startup going completely bust, right? It was a Stanford funded startup, and I was lucky to get into this company called Oracle for mobile, and this was back in 2001, right? Where it was just BlackBerries. And so for me, that kind of kicked off for me what has been a theme in my entire career, which has been working for really big companies, starting from Oracle, then going to SAP and spending 13 years there, and then coming to Microsoft, and really thinking about how do you, as a big vendor, work with a changing customer landscape, a changing competitive landscape, and do emerging things and think more entrepreneurially, even as you're part of a bigger company. And so from a business standpoint, that has really been kind of my theme. And I've been very fortunate to have been able to do that at kind of probably the three biggest enterprise software vendors in the world historically.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear because having spent all the time at Oracle, SAP, and Microsoft, so that should actually add up to a lot of experience, and not just that different kind of culture when it goes from organization to organization, different kinds of customers you meet every day. So that should be really amazing to see. So coming to the main question which I have when I actually see your profile. So how do you actually transition from big giants like these? Like you have Oracle, which has a separate culture, and if you see all of these companies, something which they have in common is that they have been existing for quite long. As you rightly said, you started with the BlackBerry age, right? So
Yeah.
it has been existing for quite long, and you see different age group of people starting from the oldest to the youngest. So how do you handle culture which is going to be something which everyone can accommodate with in an organization like Oracle, SAP, or Microsoft?
Absolutely. And, there's always that cliche that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? And I have seen that at so many different companies where the culture is so pervasive. In a company as strong, as determined as Oracle, right? It's all about your network. In a company like SAP, it's all about collaboration. And then a company like Microsoft, the key theme really is innovation and transformation right now, right? And so I think if you know historically what you stand for as a company, and are really clear that while you're embracing new technologies, that your employees are at the forefront of delivering any strategy, of really being the face to the outside world, and focus on how aware they are of who the company is, what its core values are, and how each of them can play a role in the future of the company. For me, that, especially for example, when I was rolling out a new strategy at SAP in 2014, it was a worldwide change for us, everything from financial metrics to sales metrics, culture, operational, but everything starts with communicating, number one, what is the strategy and why, right? Why is this important? So that you're no longer, just known as a legacy vendor, but you're an innovative vendor that can help take customers into the next age, right? And so for us, it was communicating and cascading strategy all the way from the highest levels all the way down to the real, honestly, the most important, who are the frontline facing employees within an organization, right? So as long as you have that message catered and it's consistent with your strategy, I think that that's the best way to handle a really large cultural change.
Yeah, actually, as you rightly said, communication, collaboration, and exactly telling, why you should do this. That really matters, as you rightly said. But when you are actually talking about why, the decision, the vision, the strategy, and all of these, so how do you go about deciding, okay, what is the right thing to do at this point of time? So how do you accommodate with all the, ecosystem around you? How do you go about setting the right vision, the strategy, and the business goals?
I think that that's that is it takes time, right? Because it may be something as simple as, years ago it was, we got to get to the cloud, right? But what does that really mean, right? Or, we need to have an AI solution. We need to have, be on social, all the things that have happened in the last 10, 20 years, right? And I think that fundamentally it's looking at, who are you in business for? And what are their needs, right? And how are you currently serving what their existing needs are and what their future needs are, right? And so if you focus everything on your customers, your employees, and then your shareholders, and define a strategy that starts with a customer and then also translates to how can employees help achieve that, and how are you offering that return to your investors or shareholders, right? I think, and then also factoring in, as you talked about, ecosystem, your partners, right? But if you think customer first, you think about what their needs are and how you're going to continue to serve them so that you remain a going concern as a business. I think that helps really figure out which technology should you go after first, right? Because it really should be about meeting the needs of both your current customers and your future customers.
Makes a lot of sense, because when you actually target a business, keeping all of the customers in mind, then that's when you actually shape the right strategy. But when you're talking about all of these customers, the business strategy and vision, so how do you know this is my right customer? Like, do you go about vetting your customers as well, or do you just go about targeting any customer you will actually be willing to pay for the product? How do you go about the process of finding the right customer for your product?
And so do you mean from a large enterprise or just as a company? How do you really think about your customer?
So as a company, so not a large enterprise per se, from a company perspective.
Right. I mean, and I think that, we have this funny statement in marketing, right? Which is, you can't just throw arrows at the wall and hope that a few of them stick, right? And that's where real segmentation, real just laser focusing on matching what is in a particular market, what is the critical need right now, right? And how are you uniquely qualified to serve that need with the technology you've built and the kind of company that you have to reach that customer, right? And so it's all about solving for need, solving for your competitive advantage. What do you have over anybody else? And then your reach to that customer, right? If you look at things with those three levers, I think that you can come up with what are the 1 to 2 segments that you should be going after and which should you be going after first, right? But without those three things, you could have the best technology in the world or the biggest R&D budget, and it won't matter, right? Because as we all know, as technologists, we love our bells and whistles. We love amazing things, right? But if there's no market for them or it doesn't resonate with your customer, it's never made sense, right? The build it and they will come model failed like, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago.
Yep, completely makes sense and resonates at this time of COVID as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely, when you have a market right now, which is completely, I would say scattered all around, people are no longer willing to buy. But anyways, so you were talking about the market and the buying capacity, the need, why you are actually building. Are you actually solving a problem? So, but, you have been in marketing and sales for quite long, marketing, sales, business, and partnerships for quite long in your career. But when you're actually conveying a vision, strategy, and if you want to market a product, so is there any important things to keep in mind? Is there any workflow or strategy you have to follow while marketing, or can you just go about just picking up a social media channel and sharing about all you have with you to offer? What is the right approach to marketing?
I mean, I really think that it starts way before that, right? Because social media or, doing online advertising, search, anything, that's a channel, right? You need to start first with the customer need, as we talked about, right? And what is kind of the needs analysis? Who is the buyer of your solution? What questions do you need to ask them to really get them thinking? And then what is the unique value proposition that you need to convey to a customer in order to not only convince them to buy your product, but even before that, to do anything at all, right? I always say that the greatest enemy of a sale is not competition, it's the do nothing mentality, right? And so, what is that unique value proposition you're offering? And who are you targeting within that? And what messages will resonate to that particular audience, right? So, that the needs analysis, customer segmentation, which we talked about, and then building the messaging that really will resonate by audience, by industry, by a particular person, right, and persona. And then ultimately, then you think about what are the vehicles, where your customers are, right? So where will you find either your current customers or your prospective customers, right? So for a very simple flow, that's kind of how I think about things.
Nice. It's simple to remember and easy to probably I don't think it's easy to implement, but yeah, it's simple to remember. Yeah. So I will mix and match some questions from the audience as well. While we go with the session, so do you think business analytics can be completely automated?
That's a very interesting question. I think that we're at a fundamental point right now where analytics started so long ago with just business intelligence, and it's evolved into something that you have tons and tons of data in an organization. How do you make sense of it, right? And how do you actually do anything with it, right? Beyond just saying, based on historical patterns, we think our forecast is going to be X, right? And I think fundamentally where we are with the advancements in, all kinds of technologies, whether it's predictive, whether it's AI coming into the mix, whether it's robotic process automation, I think right now, what's interesting for me in terms of what you said, can analytics be automated, is it can only be automated when you capture the elements of human intelligence, right? When you capture the kind of on the fly kind of decision making that a human being makes, that currently very few software have the capacity to do beyond a certain point, right? And so I think that we are at the most transformational time in terms of automating analytics, but I think that human capital that's involved is still a major component of that. So can you ever take that element out? I don't fundamentally think that you can take the human being out of intelligent thinking, right? But what you can do is enable that human being to do their job better, to look at data quickly, and to get all of the information they need at once and make sense of it.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense because you have a process in place and you have the process implemented by analytics. But latching on to the same question here. So when you are talking about data analytics and all of this, and you rightly said about AI as well. So when you are talking about an organization like SAP, Oracle, and Microsoft, who has their own ERP solutions, which holds a lot of data. In fact, I won't say hold, but captures a lot of data. So how do you think the opportunities of AI can be explored with ERP systems, with all the data they have? Do you think that ERP systems are meant to be the powerhouse for AI? Is it supposed to be empowering AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, this is a super important point that you made, right? Because what you're connecting here, right, is AI's ability to process massive amounts of data, right? And ERP being the system, or CRM being the systems that run some of the largest organizations in the world, right? And so when you combine those two things, I think that companies like SAP, like Oracle, like Salesforce, what they're fundamentally offering their customers is the ability to take data across business processes and then within those business processes and to do something actionable with it through AI, right? And so whether that is better predicting your customers' buying behavior, whether that is, capturing fraud in some of your spending possibly, or whether that is, simply making your warehouses more efficient. I think when you put AI on top of the volumes of data that exists in the world today, what you're doing is what we went back to, right? Is you are enabling a business process and a human being in that process to have as much automated and intelligence delivered to them in real time with recommendations for what they should be doing next. And I think that fundamentally helps a business to be so much more nimble, so much more responsive to their customers, suppliers, partners than it has ever been, right? So for me, that is the true promise of those integrated business processes, and then process like finance, sales, operations like that in those individual functional areas.
Makes a lot of sense. When you're talking about AI, and all of the data which you have around AI, so how do you think we can actually use AI to basically let's say take out all the manual tasks which we are doing, and use the time, or the time you have, to empower employees and empower organizations into all the productive tasks? How do you think an organization can basically onboard themselves onto an AI platform to get themselves freed of all the tedious labor which they are doing?
That's a great question. I mean, and I'll give you one example of where that's working really well, in my opinion, right? And I talked about it earlier, which is robotic process automation, right? And so here comes along a set of technologies which, using bots, can go into the most manual processes, whether that's in accounting, whether that's in warehouse management, even areas of, your call centers and your CRM, right? Implementing a RPA platform or an AI platform starts with understanding, where are your most manual processes, right? And having an idea of what you actually can repeat, right? The repeatability, the ability to actually automate that, and what that will translate to for your business, right? And the people that are involved in that, what will empowerment do for them, right? Will it help them to get closer to your customers? Will it enable them to give them real-time offers? Will it allow your supply chain to work more efficiently, knowing things like, weather data or traffic data? Will it enable the workers in your warehouse, to package, build, or service things better, right? I think that that's kind of matching that. What are your most manual processes and which function, and who are the human beings that kind of need that productivity the most currently, and what will this help them, enable them to do? I think that that's what I would look for if I were, at the other end and implementing an AI platform.
Definitely. In fact, we have a question from the audience as well. Were you involved in the development of Microsoft Surface products? And what were you And what were your marketing strategies on smart gadgets in today's world?
I was not involved in Surface. I was working on business applications, so Microsoft Dynamics and also Power BI. And then what was the second question?
So, what were your marketing strategies on smart gadgets from Microsoft?
I wasn't involved in the hardware business at all. I was only on the business application side. So I wish I had a better answer for you, but I don't.
So, another question from the audience is, how do you deal with a situation when a founder of a company is worried when you don't recommend what he wants to do, thinking in business perspective?
Okay, let me see if I understand this question. How do you handle a founder who doesn't implement what you suggest they do as an employee or as a customer?
So,
I
I
think
think
I'm going to take
he's,
it from. Go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah,
Sorry.
yes. No, please go ahead.
I think if I understand your question correctly, and please feel free to input, right? This is a classic case of, founders mentality, managers mentality, leaders mentality, and how do you get around when you know the right thing to do, but they're just not listening. I think that's kind of what you're getting at, right? And I just had this discussion with somebody yesterday, one of the startups that I advise, and my belief is that you take a deep breath, maybe take 3 deep breaths and get all your data straight, right? Like get every single data point behind you and take a couple of days, take a breather, and then go back in and request a second meeting where, you say, I'm completely on board with what you want to do. And I'm, team player, committed to executing this strategy, but I also just wanted to present to you some of the data that can help us implement this strategy better. So have in your mind, just from a negotiation standpoint, that you're committed, you're on board, and you're actually bringing in your viewpoint, probably the right viewpoint, in order to have a more abundantly focused and clear strategy, right? And so leave emotion out of it, completely out of it. I know it's really hard to do, but leave emotion out of it and lead with the numbers, lead with the insights that you have, and say, given this, how does that change how we implement, your strategy, Mr. or Mrs. CEO or Mr. or Mrs. Manager, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So basically, you are saying that have the data backing you all the way, so that
Yeah, stay
you have
calm,
something to
right?
say.
I mean, it's those stupid little stickers that you see, keep calm, right? Keep calm and use the data is what I would put there.
Yep. So, in fact, as you were talking about, using the data to, present to all the startups. But when you see in today's world, it's actually unpredictable. You don't know whether the data is actually saying things right. So, for instance, we never expected a situation like COVID to actually come up and strike every business. So, how do you think that as a business or as a founder, you can handle tough situations like COVID when you are in a as an entrepreneur or as a marketing individual or as a leadership position from different personas? How do you handle situations like these?
I actually just had this conversation with one of the CEOs earlier this week that, they had 40% plus growth rates prior to COVID, right? And now they'll be lucky if they get to 20%. And they've got the pressure of investors, they've got competitors who are, still unicorns and getting all the attention, right? And what do you do? First of all, no one could have anticipated something as extraordinary as COVID, right? So understand fundamentally that just as you're going through kind of this crisis, your customers are going through it, your neighbors are going through it. And so it's kind of in a way levels things in a way that, there's nobody on earth who was not impacted by a pandemic of this sort. And so, my guidance and kind of the way that I've been looking at things personally as well is, there has never been a time to refocus on what is top of mind for the customers that you're serving, right? Because just like you, they're fighting to survive, right? And so how can you take the set of solutions, the set of products that you have and focus them into offerings that are going to help those companies survive and thrive within change in the next few months, right? So basically what you're going through as a founder, as a CEO or a marketing leader, in order to keep your company in business, right, is exactly what your neighbors are doing. And so can you give them insights that they currently don't have? Can you give them quicker? Can you provide them with an ability to reach their customers or their suppliers more quickly, or digitize processes that have not been, and they realized in COVID that they needed them to be, or to realize they need to collaborate better, right? I think if you focus on what has most been impacted by COVID for a particular business type, and very quickly come up with a value proposition through your products that again laser focuses on that need, that would be kind of what I have been advising people to do right now.
Yep. So basically, lend a helping hand to the customer, and since they are also in the same situation as you, makes
yeah. I mean, really be their partner of choice through change, right? It's even more than a helping hand. It's about people looking to survive need technology. They need business partners who can say, we're going to be here with you through these next 6, 12, 18 months. And help you leverage digital transformation, help you leverage technologies for change.
Yep. So, like when you are talking about handling this COVID situation, but now it's not just big enterprises who are actually impacted. So it's also startups, it's also small businesses which are impacted. And in fact, startups are right now finding it really difficult for any kind of investments to come through, and also to find a traction in the market right now. So you have a background in venture capital, and you have advised a lot of startups as I see. So how would you advise startups to go about looking for funding, or probably handling this kind of market where the uncertainty is really high, and you don't know what your next step is? So should they pivot, or should they keep going on the direction in which they are going?
I mean, I think that's fundamentally the question almost all startups are facing right now, whether they're super early stage or mid stage, right? And whether they should pivot or not is really a question of have the last 6 months fundamentally changed your ability to reach your customers and to serve them in their time before and now their time after, right? And if the answer to that is we were serving them before, now this is not top of mind for them at all, then you need to pivot, right? You absolutely need to pivot your value proposition or your offerings in order to better meet who the company is today and who they're hoping to be in 6 months if they survive, right? And so back to my point of matching what you're offering with the customer's needs. That should be kind of the basis of pivoting. Now, in terms of convincing investors to let you do that, especially if you're a smaller company, that's where it really comes down to capturing that evolved market opportunity, right? And in some situations, as I mentioned before, COVID presents an even greater opportunity to help customers in retail, for example, or mom and pop stores, or businesses that didn't think about the digital experience. We have like 3 restaurants a week here in Seattle that are shutting down, some of the biggest names, right? And I think helping these offline consumer processes, consumer businesses get digital and get there quickly is a major investment theme. Is how do we help small businesses move more quickly into the digital realm and help entire industries survive, right? So I think that if you can evolve your value proposition, precisely provide the things that smaller or mid-sized businesses need, and you can talk to your investors about the new opportunity that this change presents you, I think that that's your best case for continuing to get the investment or keep the investment that you need in order to find enough time to reach your customer.
Makes a lot of sense. So you take the time you need and then work on the strategies. I'm taking another question from the audience as well. So do you think blockchain technology will be useful for small and mid-sized enterprises?
Blockchain, one of the greatest buzzwords in the last decade, right? I think, fundamentally, It will be useful in the sense that I think that small businesses play a greater role in the broader ecosystem, right? And so whether it's the role of a small business in providing a sustainable supply chain, right? One of the things that I looked at years ago was within all points of a supply chain, how do you ensure sustainability, ethics? Whether it's sourcing cotton from a particular area in India or Africa, making sure that a company is doing things the way that it should. And so blockchain unites all kinds of nodes within a particular process or a business network. And that's where businesses have an opportunity to get that stamp of approval, right? Which is what blockchain provides in terms of, providing that assurance, providing that security, and having that stamp and being a part of that value chain and being a part of that ecosystem is what I think really is where I think that blockchain benefits a business for having, being known for a particular level of assurance.
So that was actually nice. So one question I have been thinking of for quite some time is when you have big organizations like SAP, Oracle, and Microsoft, and you keep scaling up as a startup as well to huge numbers, and when you have multiple teams, so how do you go about making sure that the strategy which you had as a startup, and the vision you had as a startup, remains the vision you have as a, what do you say, an enterprise, or should the vision even remain the same? And when you have a big company or big organization, how do you make sure that the vision is rightly communicated, executed, and you are actually getting the right output in the right time? So is there any way to actually make sure that you can have the same pace which you the agility which you have as a startup when you are as an enterprise?
That's a fundamentally, it's almost an existential question for companies as they grow up, right? Is this true to who I am, right? And that comes down to what are your core values, right? When you started out, right? And if you see companies that have been able to, really stay true to their founders' mentality, they've been consistent about their core values. Like, what does the company stand for from the day that it's formed, right? What are the fundamental tenets of, who they are as kind of the soul of the organization, right? And I think as you grow, it's so important to keep those values and that soul in mind, right? Because you are going to have to change your strategy, but your core values, your vision in terms of, doing something that improves the lives of people or makes businesses more efficient, those things can fundamentally remain the same, right? Your true vision for what you're providing the world, but the strategies to reach those can evolve, right? So stay true to your values, stay true to your vision in terms of why are you in business at all, and then find the strategies that help you execute on that, and you can evolve those. But don't ever yourself forget who you are, and make sure that your employees know that even as you grow, it's for opportunity and to reach more people and to make your vision more achievable, but it's not about fundamentally changing who you are as an organization. I think that's what I've seen as kind of a recurring themes in companies who are able to do that well.
So remember where you came from. So that's
remember
something.
where you came from, right? And why did you come at all, right?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So I don't want to keep you long. So I will just end with two questions which I have. The main question which I have been thinking of as well is, women are actually, facing difficult times when they reach the senior leadership position. Everything is cool, in the, when they are as a developer, when they are as a designer, when they are in the bottom part of the pyramid. But as then when they climb up, leadership roles, so they are facing a lot of challenges as we see all around. So did you face any kind of challenge as well climbing up the ladder, and how do you actually even go about tackling the challenges you face as an individual?
That's a loaded question, but it's also one, I have been I've been fortunate, but at the same time, I have certain bits of advice that I give to women, right? In terms of how do you get into, a particular level? How do you continue to advance? And my number one thing is that learn your business area, learn a particular technology within that area, or learn some emerging thing or some emerging solution within that area and know it cold. Like so that when you're sitting in a room surrounded by, for example, for me, when I was working for SAP, I was always presenting to like a group of 10 or 15 senior executives, but going in there armed with knowledge, going in there armed with, the confidence that you know this better than anybody else, that fundamentally has kind of been a major theme for me in terms of making sure that I'm completely up to date with what's happening in a particular area. And then also, this may sound controversial, but I've never walked into a room with a chip on my shoulder that I'm a woman or I'm a woman of Indian heritage in a different, in a different demographic, right? Go in there knowing who you are, what you're there to provide, and what value you deliver to a particular business, right? And if you kind of lead with those three things, I think that the rest kind of won't come easy, right? Because there are still challenges. We're still not where we need to be, but it kind of levels the playing field a little bit, right? And the other thing that I just said to somebody yesterday is, early on in my career, I had an amazing manager say to me is that when I give you constructive criticism, don't take it personally, right? That it is feedback in order to make something better. And I have taken that bit of insight to heart. And I've been really fortunate in that my greatest mentors have been men, and they have pushed me and challenged me and said to me, you have to be better, smarter, and more agile in the things that you do simply because of where we are as an industry, right? And I want to make it easier for women, as part of my future career so that it doesn't have to be the case, but I felt very lucky to be challenged like that. So be up for that challenge because you are going to face it.
Yep. So make knowledge speak for you and be confident, be open to criticism. So,
and don't, and for men and women, because I was actually having this conversation with
Definitely.
a man, is don't be emotional, right? It's not about you. It's about the business, the customer, and the situation at hand.
Yep, makes a lot of sense as well because you make the knowledge speak for you. So and yeah, and when you are talking about all of this men, women being business leaders, strategy, and everything. So how do you go about becoming the best CEO, best CTO? Do you have a best version of something? I mean, is there any what is it? Principles, basic principles you have to follow to be a better leader?
I think that, my vision of a good leader, right? Whether it's a manager of a team, whether it's, a vice president of development, marketing, or it's the CEO of a company, right? I view the best analogy as you are the conductor of an orchestra, right? And fundamentally, you and the senior leadership have set a strategy in place, right? And so just as you interpret a piece of music, the conductor is responsible for interpreting that music and making sure that all the players within that orchestra are performing in sync, that the instruments are in sync, and that you're delivering the best possible performance of that piece of music or that strategy, right? And if you approach it as that's kind of your role, is to take the brilliant performers that you've brought onto your team and have them bring out the best version of that music ever possible. I think that always helps me think about what my role is, and that my true talent is really my employees, right? Or the people within my company.
Yep. That speaks a lot because when you are actually empowering the people in your company, and when you are actually listening to them, so probably that's when you grow as a leader, as you rightly said. So thank you for attending today's session. So I know that I dumped a lot with a lot of questions. In fact, we still have a lot of questions from the audience. What I will do is I will share all of those questions to you in the chat, and if you find time, you can probably reply to them, and I will share it across.
I'd be happy to do that. This was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me on, and thanks for the questions from the audience.
Yeah. So thanks everyone for being a part of this session. In fact, we have a lot to talk about. We can keep talking all day, but time is something which is very important for both you as well as the people who are watching the stream. So I don't want to keep you guys long, and thanks for attending, and thanks everyone who is around, and we will see you again. So I thought I would end this season with this red carpet episode, to make it really pleasant, and we will start the next session, next season on October 15th. October 15th to start with. So it was a nice end to the entire series which I have been doing for quite some time. So yeah, see you again. Bye bye, and thanks again.